Good day. I'm Chris Doyle.
And I'm Lexi Fisher.
And we together do the Sailor's Guide to the Windward Islands and the Cruising Guide to the Leeward Islands, 2 volumes. And the Sailor's Guide to the Windward Islands has now been going 40 years, which is quite an achievement, being published every 2 years consistently. So we're quite pleased with that. And these guides are the most popular cruising guides in the islands because they have the most information in them. Anyway, we hope you might take a look at one sometime.
So our From North to South, the Northern Leewards book covers Anguilla to Montserrat, and then we have the Southern Leewards, which is Antigua to Dominica, and then we have the Windwards here, which is the newest edition of the 3. This is Martinique to Grenada. And all the books include this waterproof planning chart, which is, I think is really cool. We've only been doing this for a few years.
We do also have a Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados and Guyana book, and it's not in that one. The next one, it will be.
The waterproof map has the series of islands, and then it has some really nice aerial photos of the bays for you to take a look at what you're getting yourself into. I do also have is this the first edition?
That is the first edition, the only one I know in existence.
The 1981-1982. And I really like this because of all of the hand-drawn cartoons and the charts. I can't believe, who drew the charts? Was it you or Sally?
I did all the charts.
So
Sally did the cartoons.
So Chris did all of the nautical charts and the town maps. But then we also have Sally Ertl, who has the Compass magazine, which is a sailing magazine for the Caribbean. She did all of the cartoons. Let's see, there's a good one. Right in the back here.
So, I'm going to start off showing you some Caribbean fruits you won't be familiar with. You may think you are, but they're not what you expect. Now, you're used to bananas, which you get in your local supermarket. And they do have those here. They're called dessert bananas. But these are a different kind of dessert banana. They're called figs or rock figs. And they're very delicious. You usually wait till they get a little riper before this. It doesn't hurt if they're a little black on the outside before you eat them. Very sweet and nice. Not so sweet, but also very nice, is this. This is not an eating banana at all. This is a cooking banana called a plantain. And you can kind of tell it's got a funnier head down here. It's not quite the shape of a regular banana. Very often these are quite elongated. And you can cook these up, and you saute them in a little oil or butter for quite a long time until they caramelize, and they're absolutely delicious. Here we have a soursop. This is a very wonderful fruit. You wait till it's a little soft, you cut it open, and you'll find yourself with and inside it's a lot of white flesh and big black seeds. You have to separate those out, and you don't eat the seeds, but the white flesh is delicious and something that you will never tasted anything quite like it before. It should be noted that our local oranges look green. I know you're used to oranges looking orange, but you buy the oranges here, they're green and they're perfectly ripe inside.
Passion fruit?
Another great local fruit is the passion fruit, which we show you here. They come and go in season, they're not very expensive, and they're really delicious, and you just open them up. You do it with a knife, of course. we did it. And that's what it looks like inside. You can eat the seeds, they're fine, and it's very tasty.
And often you'll buy them and the skin is wrinkly. That's totally fine. That's just part of the ripening process. This one's a little underripe, I would say, because it's so smooth. But usually when they're ripe, the skin will get really kind of wrinkly.
Then lastly, we're going to look at the papaya. This is another local fruit, which is really delicious. This one's a little bit green, but you can fix that, can't you, Lex?
Yeah, so if you take usually a fork and just score the outside all the way around. I have a knife here, so that's what I'm going to use. But that'll help it ripen. It'll quicken the ripening process. I don't know how that works or why, but it works. So yeah, just a light scoring around the outside.
And papaya contains digestive enzymes, so it's quite good to eat after a big meal. You've all seen the movie about Captain Bligh and the bounty. He went to bring this breadfruit from the Pacific and bring it to the Caribbean. As you know, the trip didn't end well. But he went back and he did bring it, and he brought these back. They've been immensely successful in the islands ever since. The original trees he planted in the St. Vincent Botanical Gardens, and you can still see suckers of those original trees there. It's an interesting fruit. It's hard when you buy it usually, and you want to wait till it gets just a tiny bit soft before you eat it. But you can't leave it too long because it'll go squidgy and horrible. Or you can cook it when it's green, in which case you can cut it up and boil it, right?
Yeah, peel the skin off first and then boil it, a lot like a potato.
Or you can bake it in the oven until it's soft, or in an open fire.
With the skin on, in the oven or on the fire.
Yeah.
And then peel it before eating it.
And then peel it before you eat it, but also once it's cooked, it'll keep for a long time in the refrigerator.
Okay. Should we do roots?
Roots. One thing you'll find a lot in the Caribbean, it'll be on the menus everywhere you go, is root provisions.
Also count ground provisions.
Yeah, ground provisions. And there are a lot of them. And, well, some of them taste... This is one of the ones with the most distinctive flavor. This is a sweet potato. Sweet, nice, can be white or pink flesh inside. Very nice mash with a little butter, salt and pepper. They all need mashing with butter, salt and pepper, by the way. These ones are eddos. And, well, all these other ones we're going to basically cook the same way. This one's Tanya.
No, this is the yam.
Yam, sorry, yam.
Yam.
No, that's the Tanya. No.
No, this is the Tanya.
That's a Tanya.
This
Okay.
one's the Tanya.
That's a Tanya, that's a yam.
Yeah.
And this one, which goes with this, which is actually the root of this vegetable here called callaloo, is dasheen. Now all of them are kind of white and weird inside. They all need boiling until they're soft. And then once they're soft, you mash them up with a lot of butter, salt and pepper and refry them, and they're quite delicious. Now, the leaves of the dasheen make a very good soup. It's called callaloo soup, and it's very popular in the islands. You must never eat this raw because it contains a lot of oxalic acid and will give you a nasty sore throat. It won't kill you, but it won't be nice. But if you chop it up and cook it for 20 minutes or so, it's absolutely fine. And it makes a wonderful soup. You take some onion, we're not going to bother with onion, you all know onion. You take a bunch of okra and a little bit of Caribbean pumpkin. Now you'll notice the Caribbean pumpkin is very different from the US pumpkin, which is kind of coarse and much redder. This makes a very fine vegetable cooked up, and it also makes its own soup. What I do is I put all those together, I cook them up with stock, and then when it's all cooked, I blend it all, and it's quite delicious.
Okay, saffron.
Okay, another root. This is called saffron, but it's not saffron that you'd know anywhere else in the world. I think they call it saffron because of the color, which is red. It's actually turmeric, but if you want it in the market, you have to ask for saffron. It's a very good anti-inflammatory, and it's a nice vegetable to eat. It's a nice flavor to put in your soups and stews and things. Right.
Sea moss.
Oh yeah. You can see this growing very often in anchorages where you're lying. You'll see lots of lines with little white buoys on them, and that's seaweed growing underneath. And that is harvested, dried, and packaged, and you can buy it. And then you have to process it yourself. You tell them about processing.
So usually you want to give it a rinse under some warm water, and then either soak it in room temperature water overnight, or you can boil it, and that'll soften it up. It'll rehydrate it, and it'll turn into this really kind of gelatinous, seaweedy stuff. And then from there, often people will blend it with some condensed milk or something else sweet, some spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, things like that, and make like a smoothie drink out of it. And it's quite good. And it's supposed to be very healthy for you. They say it cleanses the blood.
Okay, so we're going to cover a few topics today. You should have all got the USB file I gave with a lot of the useful information I normally put in the talks. So we're not dealing with that again, but there are a few things that were left out. One of them was security. You know, if you sail the Caribbean and nothing happens, of course you think it's a very safe place. If something awful happens to you, you have a completely different impression of it. From what I can see, security in the Caribbean has not really changed very much since I first started sailing here. We have some petty thefts, and we have a very occasional nasty things happen. Every few years a yachtsman can get either murdered or badly beaten up. And that has actually been going on pretty much since I first arrived. It's not common, and we got more and more yachts, so in some ways I think it's got a little safer. The question is, how much should you pay attention to security? Now you'll notice on that you should always do things like locking up your dinghy, and we've got on the a slide there to show you the normal precautions you should take. But I gave it some thought, and I decided that something happening was a little more likely than having a fire on your boat. And all insurance companies insist you sail with fire extinguishers, so I decided that really I should have something to deal with intrusion. So I set up a little infrared thing with a very loud horn and a big bright light that comes on if anyone comes into my cockpit. And it's been there for, I don't know, about 18 years now, and it's never gone off. So we're not in an insecure place, but you want to be aware that things do occasionally happen, and just be, talk to people before you go hiking off into some strange place without knowing what it's like. And otherwise you'll probably be fine. I don't think that intrusion is our worst problem. The next thing I want to mention is vendors. We live in an area of free enterprise, and boat vendors that come by your boat and offer to sell you things happen in some places. We have a list of the places where they happen on the first slide we're putting up. And most of them are very professional and nice. There are some places where they're not so professional. They're not bad, but they tend to be a little overwhelming sometimes, too many of them and too many at once. You never want to get in an altercation with them. It just isn't worth it. You want to keep your sense of humor, figure out where they're coming from, and you'll be able to handle the situation all right.
Being polite and respectful goes a really long way.
Yes.
In dealing, no thank you, I'm not interested. Being straightforward as well helps.
And I think sometimes it helps to look at what they've got, just to give them a little encouragement, even if you don't buy. They're also very useful. Now, Rasta Joseph, he's a gentleman in Cumberland Bay, and we're going to see him again a little later.
That's St. Vincent.
Yeah, that's in St. Vincent. He is a really good guy to take your lines ashore and do whatever you want in that area. He's extremely helpful, and I highly recommend him. The place where the guides have really excelled themselves is Dominica. Now, many years ago I used to go to Dominica, and the situation with the guys coming alongside was just horrible. And I discuss it each year with the tourist board, and we'd laugh, and it would be the same the next year. And then one year I came, and it all changed. The guys were wonderful. It turned out that the tourist board, the forestry division, and some other government organizations took them together and made them train as Indian River guides. Now, the Indian River flows into Portsmouth in Dominica, and they're trained to take people down there and know all the trees and the birds and everything else. And overnight it changed, and these guys are just wonderful. They not only do that, but they'll do anything you need. They'll get your laundry done, they'll get anything you want. They're really helpful. And when yachts started to be robbed there, they said, hey, we can't have this. This is going against our interests. So they set up a thing called PAYS, which is the Portsmouth Association of Yacht Security. And that has been great. You feel very secure when you're anchored in Portsmouth now. And the whole situation there, I can't say it couldn't be better. It's a wonderful interaction between local people and others. This last slide is Martin Carrier. He's one I know. He has a boat called Providence, and he's an excellent guy as well. Indian river tours, but they also do everything. I mean, they'll take you to clear customs, they've got these fast boats, they'll take you snorkeling, they'll get your laundry done, they'll help you provision. Yeah.
Take garbage.
Everything. So now we're going to take a break from that, and I'm going to hand you over to Lexi, who's going to talk about the environment.
Yeah, so throughout the islands there are a number of marine protected areas, and we try our best to outline them and the regulations in our books. Sometimes things do change, so generally it's a good idea to clarify with Customs and Immigration when you clear in about what the regulations in the marine protected area are. But generally they don't allow anchoring. Often they'll have mooring balls that they encourage you to take for a fee. Usually there's no fishing. Throughout the island, spearfishing isn't allowed by visitors, only locals. So no spearfishing anywhere in the islands, but generally when you're sailing around you can line fish or troll, except for in the MPAs. Also, what are the other rules for the MPAs? No fishing. Oh, try and use your holding tanks in the MPAs. Generally they don't want you dumping straight into the ocean.
Some of them have fees. Quite a lot of them have fees.
Right, especially in it was Anguilla has some really steep fees. Yeah, for being there.
But often the fees include taking a mooring, so that's somewhat helpful.
Yeah. And the fees mean there are generally less boats. So if you're looking for some secluded areas, the marine protected areas are a good option.
They're also very beautiful areas. They have the best snorkeling and things like that. Yeah.
I will say on another environmental note, with the spearfishing, visitors are allowed to spearfish lionfish, which is an invasive species. They're pretty distinct looking. The spines are venomous though, so try not to get poked by them. It's quite painful. But a lot of the dive shops will organize lionfish hunts to go out and kind of do a bit of a cull, and then they will prep the fish for you, remove the venomous spines, and then send you home with some nice fillets.
Yeah, I think it's better you do that with a dive shop.
Yeah, definitely. Because of the venomous nature of the fish, it's definitely worth going with a dive shop for any lionfish hunting.
Okay, so now I'm going to take us...
I got a little bit more on the environment, Chris. So other general guidelines to follow, try and anchor in sand only and not over the reef. So, dropping your anchor in good visibility when you can see what's on the bottom. We really try and avoid damaging the coral reefs.
That's very important.
And coral isn't good holding anyways. You want to be in sand for the most part. Sunscreen is another big one. Recently, science has discovered that a lot of sunscreens have some really harmful chemicals to coral reefs. The term reef safe has no scientific definition, so if you're going and buying sunscreen and only looking for the reef safe label, it's not necessarily going to be safe for the reef. So we encourage you to really read the label and the ingredients instead of just looking for the reef safe mark on the front of the bottle. And then just generally, vegetation on really small sandy islands is quite delicate. Try not to remove any of the vegetation, especially on the beach or sandy areas. It might lead to increased erosion.
Okay, I'm going to now talk a little bit about some anchorages in the island, and I'm going to start with St. Lucia. This is not every anchorage in St. Lucia, it's some of my favorites. And I'm not including Rodney Bay because you're all there now and you will have got to know it well. As you head south from Rodney Bay, you pass the capital city Castries and the Buckeye oil depot at Cul-de-sac Bay before arriving at Marigot Bay. Marigot Bay is a deep, mangrove-lined bay with a small entrance, so well hidden that a story is told that once an English admiral hid his ships in here when being chased by a superior French fleet. He tied palm trees to his masts and the French sailed right on by. It is very secure and often used as a hurricane shelter. Capella has a major resort and marina in the bay with several bars, restaurants and swimming pools. They rent the official moorings inside the bay. Many smaller establishments are also in the bay, including Chateau Migo right at the entrance and Doolittle's by the beach on the northern shore. Inside the lagoon on the northern shore is the Mango Beach Inn. If you tie up to their dinghy dock, you can take the exciting Marigot Ridge hike. First climb up to the Mango Beach Inn and let them know you are heading up the trail. They will show you the beginning. It starts right above the inn and heads straight up to the ridge with a section called Stairway to Heaven. At the top, you reach the meditation platform with a spectacular view down into the bay. From here, you can walk along the ridge and descend into Doolittle's Bar and Restaurant. By this time, you may need a swim and a drink. You can return along the mangrove walkway back to Mango Beach Inn. The next place that I really like is Anse Cochon. Anse Cochon is a beautiful little bay with very good snorkeling on both sides, and there's a resort there owned by Nick Pinnock. When Nick started talking about building this resort, we were all a little bit scared because it was like, well, this is the last little bay we've got when there's nothing. But you know, he's done such a wonderful job. He's really enhanced the area, and it's one of my favorite little places in St. Lucia. It's part of the SMMA, which is a marine park area. You can anchor on sand in the middle of the bay. I'm not sure to what extent Nick is going to be open. I know right now you can go with the dive shop. You can also get takeout from the restaurant. They'll either deliver it to your boat or maybe you can pick it up in the dinghy. But you just call them up and find out what's going on. There's some wonderful little steps you climb up to get to the hotel, which is a few hundred feet, well, a couple of hundred feet above the beach. And you get a lovely view when you get up there of the beach and the bay. The hotel itself is extremely charming. It's very gardened and has a delightful restaurant and other facilities which we'll come to. You will see fishermen in this bay, and it is, as part of the park, it's what they call a fishing priority area, which means the fishermen have priority, which means if they ask you to move, you should. They never usually take more than an hour or so to finish what they're doing. TK has a delightful little dinghy dock, which they only put in last year, which you can use. You're not allowed to lock onto it, but you can talk to the security guy and he may keep an eye on it. They have a wonderful spa if you want a massage, and I'm not sure whether this will be open, but that's something you can find out. It's a totally delightful place to go and spend an hour or two and relax. And they also have a nice little wood-fired pizza oven, and that's available lunch or dinner, normally, certainly for lunch. And I think you'll be able to get pizza delivered even if you can't go in there and eat. The next really magnificent place in St. Lucia, and it really is their pièce de résistance, I think, is the area called Soufrière and the Pitons, which is really a scenic wonderland. All a marine park. It's part of a place called the SMMA, or Soufrière Marine Management Area. You have to take a mooring, and there are fees, but it's well worth it. The snorkeling is excellent. And the whole of the interior here is just totally delightful. These two pitons that you see here, they kind of dominate the landscape from wherever you are. There's a view of them from up in La Haute, which is about 1,000 feet up to the north of Soufrière, and that's a totally photogenic view. And then if you go way back into the country, you still see them wherever you are. There are the pitons sticking up. The countryside here is very charming. This is just a typical picture of a little farmer's hut, and it looks like he's drying cocoa in a hollowed out rock. There's a little park called Tête Paul, which has this particularly splendid view of the pitons. And the really nice way to do this is to find a guide and hike up from the bottom. You anchor your boat in between the pitons, take your dinghy on the beach and get a guide to hike you all the way up there. That is a wonderful trip. There's one place you shouldn't miss, which is the Dechine restaurant at the Lederer Resort. It stands on a ridge line overlooking the pitons. And you can't really photograph it. I mean, this kind of GoPro gives a little bit of an idea, but it's totally open. It's on a ridge. Everything's open to the view. It's quite precipitous. And when you first look at it, it's like, you feel like saying ooh and ah. Very nice restaurant and a great place to visit. Down at the back of Soufrière, you can walk to the botanical gardens. These are very beautiful gardens, and there's something very special there that I particularly like. When you go there, you pay your fee to go in, and I suggest, if you like the idea, is to take a towel with you and ask for the upstairs bars. It's just one room, 2 bars. And it's a little sort of facility with its own little garden. It's very beautiful. So you walk up through the garden until you get there, and when it's free, because they can only take one guest at a time, or two if you're a couple, you go into this room, and these are the tubs, and when you turn those big valves on, hot water from the volcano just gushes out and fills those tubs in no time. It's supposed to be very helpful. They were built by Louis the 16th, I think, for his troops. And I think that's a totally delightful experience there. Because of the volcanic activity, there are plenty of little hot falls and warm falls and other waterfalls around. This is one of my favorites, called Sapphire Falls. As you can see, it's very sweet. It's a nice hike down there. It's owned by Jarrod, a good guy to contact. He sometimes leaves his brother there to watch it. His brother seems to have a speech impediment, but he can make himself understood, and you can pay him the fee of whatever he wants. Also, just below those falls is an area of mud, and this is something people do in the Soufrière area, where you put this kind of gooey muddle over you, and it's supposed to be very helpful. Next, we're going to the little village of Laborie, which is on the south coast towards the western end. I've always liked Laborie. It's very sweet, unpretentious, the people are nice, they're not pushy, they're not trying to sell you things too much, and it's just got a very pleasing atmosphere. A little bit rolly, but it's worth it. This gives you an overview, and as you can see, there are quite a few reefs at the entrance, so you want to check your charts. And this is not a place to rely on electronic charts. Use our guide or some recent nautical chart. It's a place where the fishermen hang around and they make these big fish traps. They weave them under the nets of the trees. And it has a very splendid beach, which you can walk along. And towards the other end of that, there is a playing field where you can watch them playing sports. I was visiting my friend Anne, who is my agent in St. Lucia sometimes for the guide, and I noticed on her wall an incredible painting of the pitons. And I said, "Who did that?" She said, "Jonathan Gladding." She said, "He lives in Laborie." And I got very interested about that. Now, I haven't met Jonathan yet. I really hope to, but I did talk with him, and I looked at his art. I went through many pictures that he has online. And I find he's really good at capturing light and the Caribbean scene. He lives in Laborie much of the year. His partner is a lady from Laborie. And I think he goes to Cape Cod for part of the year. This picture is Laborie itself. That's the little road that goes down to the water. He paints in Laborie, and he has a Facebook page. I don't have the Facebook page link here, but I do have his webpage link coming up on the next picture. So you can make a note of it if you wish. But he often does things, on his Facebook page, he often says, "Let's go paint on the beach today," or something like that, and people that are interested in painting go along. I think it's a very nice scene if you're into the arts. So that's some of my favorite places in St. Lucia, and now we're going to run on through the islands briefly. We start with St. Vincent. Last year, when we presented this talk, I extolled the idea of hiking the St. Vincent volcano, having no idea it was about to erupt. It started showing warning signs while I was in St. Lucia, getting ready to head for St. Vincent. As I sailed down, I could see that toxic gases had destroyed significant vegetation under the crater. I checked in at the Young Island Cut anchorage and took the required COVID test. The results came back a few days later, and they let me know I could finish my quarantine in Bequia if I wished. So I set sail, got the sails trimmed and the boat steering itself, and I turned around to look behind me, and wow, the volcano was in full eruption. I had by chance witnessed the 3 eruptions that have happened during my lifetime. This was the first time that the internet gave us the ability to see what was happening to the ash. It blasted straight up into the jet stream and was carried to the east, where much of it fell on Barbados. Once it fell out of the jet stream and down into the regular trades, some of it blew back, giving everyone clean-up to do. The volcano is now quiet again, but the trail to the volcano is still closed. If you read it has been opened again, what an adventure that will be. St. Vincent, like St. Lucia, is very wild and rugged, and this is one of my favorite bays up on the northwest side of St. Lucia called Cumberland Bay. Unfortunately, there is no customs here, so you'd have to clear in somewhere else and come back up here if you wanted to visit. This is one side of the bay, and this is the other. And you can walk back into the hills and you get very nice views looking down. You can go much higher than this, but this is just one view as you walk up the hill behind. Now here's our friend again, Joseph Rasta. He's the guy to get to help you with your lines in there, and you can talk to him about anything and you can get him to help you in any way you want. He's very good. In a little house behind the beach, an Italian guy has set up a little factory. He used to be a charter skipper and he loved Cumberland Bay above all bays. And he set up this little factory making handmade lures, quite technically sophisticated ones, and ones that really work well. And he loves the arts and he loves lures. He kind of combines them in this business. And he took a local artist who is very industrious. I met him years ago when I hiked up to the village above, and he was making all these calabash bowls. Anyway, he's often running the shop when the Italian isn't around, and the lures are called two socks because the Italian used to be called socks. For our next adventure, it will be better to be anchored or moored in the south part of St. Vincent, in Young Island Cut or Blue Lagoon. We have already mentioned Young Island Cut. Blue Lagoon is a mile to the east and has the Great Blue Lagoon Marina, where you will find some good restaurants. There are many more all the way through Young Island Cut. The area is dotted with rental moorings, and while there is plenty of water in Young Island Cut, some monohulls will be too deep to enter the lagoon. Others may need to work the tides. This area is a good base from which to explore ashore, and the place I'm going to mention is a fair taxi ride inland. We are headed to Montreal Gardens, my favourite botanical gardens in the whole of the Eastern Caribbean. You approach through the Mesopotamia Valley, a rich scenic agricultural area. Montreal Gardens is nestled in the valley, just under the mountains. TripAdvisor lists Montreal Gardens as the #1 attraction in St. Vincent, but not many visit, mainly because the approach road is terrible, and many taxi drivers will not even want to take you there. But it is worth finding one who will. It is not huge, but when you get inside, it is like a whole new world. Montreal Gardens is the creation of Tim Vaughan, a well-known landscape designer, but in this case, he works entirely for his own artistic satisfaction. Tim's approach is to lay out the garden with a feel for shape, colour and texture, and then let nature run riot with it. This is no neat and tidy botanical garden, more like a brilliantly coloured tropical jungle. You will find yourself going down narrow paths and brushing up against the plants which grow into them. I remember once a tree fern fell in a grassy patch of the garden. Tim just let it lie and watched as nature slowly took it over and reabsorbed it back into the ground. In this photo the shape of the tree is still outlined, but it is covered in growth. Today it is hard to see where it was. As you wander along the narrow paths and down the steps to the river, the majesty of this garden will be all around you. You can stop almost anywhere and delight in the detail. Brightly coloured flowers, all shapes and sizes, elaborately patterned leaves, a tiny lizard. There is nothing else quite like it in the Eastern Caribbean. Now, going down the Grenadines, and I wonder what can I do on the Grenadines? You're all going to be in the Grenadines anyway, and you're going to enjoy them. So I thought I'd just take you up the highest hills of a few of them. This is Bequia, and has a wonderful hill to climb up called Mar Peggy, or Peggy's Rock sometimes. And you start by Friendship Bay. You're looking back at Friendship Bay here, and you hike up the mountain, or you hike up the hills, and you get through some long grass, and you get to some rocky stuff, and finally you go up and up and up until you get to this incredible view at the top, and that is Admiralty Bay, which is on the other side of the island looking down. The next island we're going to go to is Canouan, and this is the Mount Royal in Canouan. A wonderful view from up there. Very nice little hike up, but there's a little bit of a problem in as much as nearly all the land in Canouan is gated, so you can't just wander off your boat and go. If you want to climb that one, and I think it's well worth climbing, the place to ask about it is in a new little coffee bar called the Canouan Tourist Centre, which is right by the roll-on dock in the main harbour. And they will have guides available and be able to organize it for you. The other little thing to know about Canouan is they have a newish marina. I've never seen a marina with water that looks quite like a swimming pool so much as this one. It's really very lovely. It's not cheap, but it's not overly expensive. And it's just a lovely place to go and spend a little time. They have very nice shops, they have a couple of restaurants. It's a very pleasing place. Now the Tobago Keys, you're definitely going to go to the Tobago Keys at some time. I have to say they're no real hills, tiny hills only. But you can kind of make something about climbing up them. You've got to go through bush and cactus and all that to get to the views of the top, which are quite pretty. You start with that one and then you go through some more bush and come out on the other side and you get that view, which is very nice. And then the last view, I had to use the drone for that one. I went to the top of the hill, but it just wasn't good enough, so the drone went up a little bit more and took that picture above Jamesby, which is very pretty. You see the outer reef there and all the yachts anchored. Union Island, this is a photograph by Jeremy, who runs the JT kite surf there, as is the last picture in this series. There's two things I'm going to show you about, both in this picture. One is that little island in the bottom, which is called Happy Island. The other is the rock you see on the far left-hand side, a little peak there. That's called the Pinnacle. Happy Island is a wonderful place to have a drink in the evenings because all the kite surfers come and show off and put up a magnificent display of kite surfing up and down here. It's really quite delightful. The island itself was built by a guy called Janty, who owns it, and he built it from nothing on the reef. What happened was he's working for tourism and he had this huge pile of conch to get rid of. So he took them out to the dead part of the reef and put them down and concreted them in and started his little place. And it's grown and grown and grown over the years. I don't think it's going to get much bigger than it is now, but it's become quite a feature. Now we're going to hike up that little pinnacle I told you about. And this shows the way up, basically. It's one of the more challenging hikes. And I didn't actually make it the last time I went. Something had shifted in the rocks a little. And I decided that I'd want about 20 or 30 feet of rope to get up to the very top again. So I think something happened there. But it's not hard to go if you took the rope. As you can see, the climbing is steep and a little frightening sometimes. And then this is a view from the top taken by Jeremy again. And this is with a drone. He sent it out. So that's him and probably his wife standing on the top. And I'll tell you something, they're very brave to stand on the top of that rock. In a regular trade breeze, I wouldn't do it. It's very wobbly and it's a long way down, however you look at it. Then we're going over to Petit Martinique. Petit Martinique, you're now in part of Grenada, and that has a little tiny peak you can climb to. And that's how it is at the top. And that's the kind of view. What you're actually looking at is PSV and all the Grenadines laid out, which is quite pleasant. So the last of the Grenadines we're going to tackle with peaks is Carriacou, and Carriacou has two peaks, almost identical in height. I think High North is slightly higher than Chapeau Carré, but only by a couple of feet. And this is the Chapeau Carré hike, and you go up through some sort of dry agricultural kind of cow land. Then you get to a ridge where you've got some nice local trees that give a little sun protection. And then you get to the top, and that's looking south over some of the little islands to the south of Carriacou. And that is looking to the west, and you see Tyrrell Bay there, which is a good place to start this hike. The other hike, High North, you can hike from Anse-la-Roche. The trails are quite well marked and so on. We didn't do that, we came up just to be awkward. We came up from the east coast, and here we are hiking up the hill. And then you get to a part of the top where you can see much of the island stretching out in front of you when you look south. And finally you reach the very top part where you get a view of the whole of Hillsborough Bay, which you can probably see better without the people. So now we're going to go down to Grenada. Grenada is interestingly an older island than both St. Vincent and St. Lucia. It's
geologically?
Geologically, yeah. Geologically, and therefore it's been more rounded off. It doesn't have quite the dramatic sauvage landscape of either St. Lucia or St. Vincent, but it has very beautiful, sort of more gentle features. Because it's far south in the Caribbean, and the Caribbean far south is considered the safest as far as hurricanes, it has become the cruising mecca for cruising yachts. And there are always hundreds and hundreds of yachts here many bays around the island, hanging out. Has an awful lot of facilities, which I'm not going to get into now. We cover all very well in our guides. This is a picture of one of the other bays. We have many bays like this, very beautiful. One of the things that happened to me when I got to Grenada is some friends invited me to go hiking with them to a place called Upper Concord Falls. This is not Upper Concord Falls, this is Lower Concord Falls, which is quite pretty. But it's also got a village around it, and since we first used to go up there, they put steps and changing rooms and other things, which kind of changed the experience a little bit. But that day we went above the village, and we left it behind very quickly, and we hiked up the mountain and up the river. First we went through some paths through agricultural land, and I remember when I first did that, it was very idyllic. There were a lot of nutmeg trees, and it almost seemed like the Garden of Eden. Eventually you come to the river, and you're hiking through fairly rainforesty-like territory. Finally you get to the falls, which are just perfect in the wild, in the middle of nowhere. And of course that was a place to go. You'd never meet anyone up there. Some years later, when tourists was going, I think I met 12 German tourists with a guide hiking up there. So we started looking for more falls. I would say there's another, probably our most photogenic fall, called Seven Falls. Again, quite popular with tourists, and people sometimes jump off the fall at the end. I've heard of people damaging themselves quite badly.
Yeah,
so
not recommended.
I would not recommend that. But as you can see, photogenically, you can't really beat it. But also, you know, a lot of people go there. Now when you go, they'll rent you a walking stick, you pay a little fee to go in, and down you go. I haven't been there since they had this crazy idea of building a zip line down.
I haven't been yet either.
And so I don't know how that's changed the walk down, but I'm sure it's still very pretty. The guy I do a lot of my hiking with is called Henry. This is my friend Henry, and Henry one day said, I've got a fall I want you to see, I've heard about. I haven't actually been there. It's called Tufton Hall Falls. So off we went hiking. We passed through some lovely agricultural land. Well, the first day we hiked around, we saw some nice country, but we never found the falls. So Henry did some talking to a few friends, and we went back a few days later. And then we found the path that went down to the river. And then it was all about the river. What a wonderful river the Tufton Hall River is. You start hiking up the river, and you're either on the river or right beside the river all the way up, and it's just a delight. Everywhere you go, it's just so pretty. With lots of places you can sit and running water, and it's just, I don't know any other river quite like it. When you get to the top, there's a rather difficult part here. There's actually a waterfall. You can just see it in the middle to the right of that rock coming down. That's a small waterfall. The actual Tufton Falls heights, which are the highest in the island, are on top of this. So you have to climb up this thing to the top. One of the reasons I like hiking with Henry is the first time we went up, there was no rope. You'll see there's a rope there now going up it. And he found some kind of old bit of coconut, and he leant it against this little cliff. And he just kind of scrambled up, and then I put my arm up, he grabbed me and he pulled me up. Anyway, these are the Tufton Hall Falls. The falls themselves are not that special, but the day in the river is really spectacular. So that was quite a few years ago, and then just maybe 2 or 3 years ago, he called me up and said, they found a new fall. It's called Golden Falls, and it's got some hot water in it. I said, well, let's go. So we set off. Henry has his own way of getting there, which is not the way most people go. And we went down a very steep hill for a long, long way to the river. And then when we got the river, we climbed up, and finally we found ourselves in Golden Falls. There is quite a lot of, you have to do some rope work here. You have to pull yourself up on ropes and things in places. And this, you can see it really is a golden color, and because it's volcanic water, there is a hot patch in that waterfalls you can find. Now for the next hikes, we're going to have to talk a little bit about the people that do the hash in Grenada. The hash house harriers is something you need to know about. It's a loose group of people. I mean, it's a proper association and everything. They call themselves drinkers with a running problem. And they go out every week to a different place in the island, and they set up trails.
Every Saturday. It's always a Saturday.
Yeah. And they set up trails, and they have both walking trails and running trails, depending on your level of energy. And Lynn, who's the lady you can see, you'll see it better later in that yellow t-shirt down there. She's one of the keen hashers, and so is the other gentleman you see there, that's Ian. And they know the island better than anyone, so they find out about things that I haven't found out about. And one of the things is, have you ever been to Cass Falls? I said, never heard of them. So we hired a guide and we went up to this little village, which is called Mount Horn, and we hiked up the river for there. The hike at the beginning is actually the same hike you do for Golden Falls when you're going from the village. And it's very pretty agricultural country. And you just hike along quite nice little paths until eventually you get to the river. And finally you get to the waterfalls, which are really very photogenic. Though it has to be said, they don't have a swimming pool below, but you can take a very good shower there. A good guy to know about if you want to go hiking to these places is called Delon Charles. I think it's Real Grenada Tours. And he's been really getting into hiking. In some ways, Henry, who was always the hiking man in the early days, the local taxi driver used to call him the mud taxi because he's willing to go with people to strange places. He's a bit retired now, so he doesn't go out that often. We sometimes go for a nice hike. But I think Delon Charles is now taking people to these places. I would say, though, that Henry Safari Tours is an excellent yacht services and taxi group. They do laundry, they fill gas tanks, they sort out any problems yachts have, and they also, of course, do all the usual taxi work that people need. So Len said, well, let's go to Adelphi Falls. So we went up and we stopped at Grand Etang. Now Grand Etang has a number of wild monkeys that have trained tourists and locals to give them bananas. So here's a monkey with a trained tourist hanging out waiting for a banana. A little trail into agricultural land. It's a very beautiful hike. And it's a nice little fall. Again, no big pool, but a very nice shower underneath. I always think of Grenada really as the island of waterfalls. And the other thing I think of is the island of chocolate, but that is more recent. Grenada has long grown cocoa. It's called the Isle of Spice, and apart from cocoa, they grow a lot of nutmeg, cinnamon, bay leaf, and other spices. In fact, you can get, any little tourist shop will give you a whole package of things you can get. This is a typical cocoa pot growing off the trunk of a tree. And as I say, they've always grown that, and it's been part of their farming. So then they collect the cocoa and they put it into heaps. And then after a while, they cut it open, and inside the cocoa bean is covered with a nice sweet kind of jelly-like substance. So you open that up and it's all dumped into these vats here and left to ferment. Then it's taken out of there and it's put into trays to dry. They're all on rails, so when it rains you just shove them up back under the roof, and when the sun shines again you bring them out. And now and again you have to rake around the cocoa so it gets properly dry. So that's where we got to in Grenada, and they used to just export those beans to rich guys that made all the money making chocolate in Europe. And then came along Mott. Mott was a very interesting guy. He came to Grenada as a Peace Corps worker, and then he went bush and lived in a valley in a little tiny hut somewhere. And he was thinking, he wasn't doing much, but he was thinking. And at some point a landslide came and wrecked his hut. So he decided it was time to take action. And what he'd been thinking about was that Grenada should produce its own chocolate. He went back up to the States to get some financing and help, and he came back down and started the Grenada Chocolate Factory. Now, a chocolate factory is a very expensive thing to put up. We don't have that kind of funds for the kind of volume we're dealing with. So what Mott found was some old antique pieces, like this chocolate grinder here. He was very environmentally minded, and he used to, when the chocolate became popular and he won some awards in Europe, he started exporting, and he did it by sail on these boats that have no engines, both to the US and to the UK. Unfortunately, Mott died in an accident, but his company goes on, and it's spawned a lot of other companies that have taken up the idea. Grenada has, at the moment, 4 active chocolate companies. This is Diamond Chocolate Company. They make Juve chocolate. It's set in lovely old ruins, so it's a nice place to visit. I find their ginger chocolate is delicious. And they actually did buy, I think, an old small factory from somewhere, so they're actually the biggest of the manufacturers in Grenada. My favorite chocolate factory in Grenada at the moment is the little tiny Crayfish Bay Falls chocolate factory, run by Kim and Lilette. He used to grow chocolate for the Grenada Chocolate Factory, but when the Grenada Chocolate Factory had some upheavals after the death of Mott, he started growing for himself, and then he started making chocolate. It's a very small scale. One of his claims to fame is he couldn't really afford a proper oven for roasting the chocolate, so he made one himself using charcoal, which is here. Everyone told him it couldn't be done, the heat had to be too even, but he makes the most wonderful chocolate. This is how they grind their chocolate. See how small those grinders are? Very tiny operation, but very good chocolate. And here are some of the chocolates you can buy in Grenada. There's the Grenada Chocolate Company, Juve. This is the Crayfish Bay, and then there's one called Belmont Estate. That's a lovely estate to visit as well. And so that gets to the end of my little tour, and I'm going to hand you over to Lexi, who's going to talk a little bit about water sports.
Yeah, so I am, in addition to co-author of the books with Chris, I'm a PADI scuba instructor and freediver instructor. So I spend a lot of time in the water here in the Caribbean, and I thought I'd give you guys a bit of an idea of what you can expect from snorkeling and scuba diving here in the windwards and leewards. So first of all, scuba diving is the most kind of technically advanced way we spend time underwater. There are a number of certifying bodies here in the Caribbean, but by far the largest and most widespread is PADI. That's the Professional Association of Diving Instructors. You'll find a shop on almost every island, maybe besides the very small Grenadines. But PADI has a number of courses you can take, from like very introductory beginner to the more advanced ones that most of the shops will teach. The introductory course is what they call a Discover Scuba Diving course, sometimes abbreviated to DSD, and it's what they used to call the resort course. So it's about one full day or 2 half days, and you watch a short video that teaches you a bit about some of the core safety principles. They'll then take you into a swimming pool or some confined water, some very shallow water. They'll show you how to put on the equipment, how to breathe out of the regulator. And then after that, they'll take you out for a dive. So out in the open water, and the instructor kind of handles all of the technical stuff for you, and you just get to enjoy the scenery and the reef and the fish. And that's what's called a DSD. Now, the DSD doesn't certify you to dive without a dive shop. So if you would like a bit more freedom and to learn a bit more about the equipment and the setup and things like that, I really recommend that you do what's called the Open Water Scuba Certification. And that's a bit more in depth. And if you do a DSD and then decide to do the open water, if it's with the same instructor and the same dive shop, you can use the skills that you learned during your DSD as credit towards the open water. So if you think you're going to be interested, I really recommend doing the DSD somewhere that you're going to be for at least a few days, so that if you do really like it, you can then add on the open water certification, and then that will certify you to dive with other dive shops and on your own and things like that. Besides scuba diving, there's also free diving in the Caribbean. It's not quite as popular yet, but PADI does have a certification course that you can take. There are a few free diving centers in the Caribbean, and free diving is breath hold diving, so without any of the compressed air. So you just use a snorkel, mask, and fins, hold your breath, and dive down.
How long do you hold your breath for?
It depends, person to person.
How long do you hold your breath?
Me? My personal best is 3.5 minutes.
3.5 minutes.
But that's not while swimming, that's what's called static apnea, where you're just laying in the water. There are some safety concerns with free diving, as there are with scuba diving, so it is best to get some professional training if you're interested. And there are a few centers within the Windward and Leeward Islands that teach free diving. In Grenada, there's Eco Dive. I teach here in Carriacou through our day charter company, Incognito Adventures. And then Barbados has quite a few free dive shops. And then in Dominica, there's some a training center as well, like international competition in Dominica. Not this year, but hopefully they'll be running it again next year. And then last but not least, we have snorkeling, which is kind of the easiest and most
satisfying.
Most satisfying, yeah. So snorkeling here in the Caribbean is lovely. A lot of the time, there's some really good visibility, nice clear water. So I thought I'd quickly run through some snorkeling equipment with you guys. If you're new to it, it can be a little bit intimidating if you've never worn a mask and snorkel. So I'll just show you quickly the kind of equipment that I like to use. So this is my mask and snorkel. Ooh, a little wet still. This is what I use for free diving and snorkeling. The snorkels, I like to have just like the most basic, simple snorkel you can get. It has a mouthpiece, and then this is the top, this is the bit that's out of the water. You just put it in your mouth, just like this, and breathe normally. A lot of the time snorkels you buy have like the valve at the bottom and then some other like fancy thing at the top to keep water out. I find it's just like more bits to break. So the simpler the snorkel, the better, in my opinion. And then with the mask, you'll see it's got nice soft silicone, because if you dive down at all, you want to be able to pinch your nose to equalize your ears and your sinuses. Now, when you buy a mask, it's important to make sure it's not going to leak. And the way to do that is to have the strap up in front, place the mask on your face, and then suck in through your nose, and it should create a seal and just stay there. So I'll just quickly demonstrate and look a little bit silly. So you put it on, suck in through your nose.
Can't pull it off, it's good.
So that should create a nice seal. Also, when you put the mask on to go snorkeling, you'll want to make sure you don't have any hair in the seal, or else that'll cause it to leak. You can get masks and snorkels at most of the chandleries, Island Water World, Budget Marine.
I want to mention something here.
Yeah,
Being a male, you can't get a mask to seal properly with a moustache unless you use a lot of grease on it.
Yeah.
Vaseline or something like that.
Yes, good point. So when you buy your new mask from the store, most times the manufacturer has left some residue on the inside of the glass. That's going to cause your mask to fog, which is really, really annoying. So first thing you do when you buy a mask is you either you get some toothpaste, the really gritty kind, and put it on the inside, and then give it a really good rub around and really scrub off that residue that's left on the glass, and that's going to help prevent it from fogging. And then before you go in the water each time, you can use a little bit of dish soap to clean the lenses on the inside. Make sure to rinse it out good, but that's gonna create an anti-fog layer and further prevent your mask from fogging, because it's quite annoying, the foggy mask.
That toothpaste one's new to me, so
Yeah,
I learned something. Yeah.
People will also take a lighter and actually like kind of scorch the inside of it,
dangerous.
and that'll burn off the residue, and then you rub it off and it comes off. But that one's a little bit more.
I think toothpaste is a better idea.
Toothpaste is a good one. It works well too if you have an electric toothbrush, and then just to like zzz. One other thing, if you have a prominent brow here, you might be interested in a mask like this that's not connected in the middle, because it gives you more space for your brow line. You see this one? Sometimes if you have a prominent brow, this bit's gonna press between your eyes and get a little bit painful. So I think you don't have a very prominent brow, but for a lot of people, this is gonna be a lot more comfortable. Fins are pretty basic. You wanna make sure they're not too loose, not too tight. There's a couple different kinds. This kind has kind of the elastic back that lets you wear booties in it to keep you a little bit warmer. This kind can be worn with or without booties. And then there's the more typical kind of foot pocket one, like this. When you try it on land, it is going to feel a little bit tighter than in the water, because the water is going to lubricate the foot pocket a bit and make it slide around a bit more.
That is a powerful
This is a free diving fin. It was the only one I had with the foot pocket right here. One of the other things I really recommend when you're snorkeling is carrying a safety float of some kind. This is like a purpose-made one. You can see it has the little dive flag here, so people know you're somebody in the water. Anything will work though, really, like a buoy, a red buoy.
This is very important.
A noodle.
It's very important because
Yeah.
we do get accidents with people not seeing swimmers and divers, and we got some quite nasty accidents that way.
Particularly if you're in an anchorage or a bay where there's some dinghy traffic and things like that, it's really, really important that you keep yourself visible.
Yeah.
I like this kind of float because it's big enough that you can lay over it if you get tired, and you can take a little bit of a rest. And then it's got a clip on the end. You can tie your string onto it and then just tow it behind you. So this is what I use when I go out snorkeling. in the bay here. One last thing I wanted to touch on is the full face masks that have been popular in the last couple of years.
Some people love them.
Some people love them, particularly if you're uncomfortable in the water and a little bit nervous about having water around your face. They're great for keeping the water off your face, but you cannot dive down underwater with the full face masks because you cannot get to your nose to equalize your sinuses. And if you dive down and you don't equalize, it can be very painful and cause some pretty serious injuries to your ear canals and your sinuses. So if you do wear the full face mask, keep in mind you cannot dive under the water. It might be a good way to introduce yourself if you're a little bit nervous, but yeah, I really recommend the standard style masks where you can get to your nose to equalize. And I think that's it.
Okay, so that's the end of what we're going to talk to you about today. We hope you'll all get cruising. We know it's going to be a little slower for you this year because you have a little more things to go through with health and COVID. But take your time and spend some time in the water, spend some time in the hills, and have a great trip in the Caribbean.